Harrenhal. Every child of the Trident knew the tales told of Harrenhal, the vast fortress that King Harren the Black had raised beside the waters of the God's Eye 300 years past, when the Seven Kingdoms had been seven kingdoms, and the Riverlands were ruled by the Iron Men from the islands. In his pride, Harren had desired the highest hall and the tallest towers in all of Westeros. 40 years it had taken, rising like a great shadow on the shore of the lake, while Harren's armies plundered his neighbors for stone, lumber, gold, and workers. Thousands of captives died in his quarries, chained to his sledges, or laboring on his 5 colossal towers. Men froze by winter and sweltered in the summer. Weirwoods that had stood for 3,000 years were cut down for beams and rafters. Harren had beggared the Riverlands and the Iron Islands alike to ornament his dream. And when at last Harrenhal stood complete, on the very day King Harren took up residence, Aegon the Conqueror had come ashore at King's Landing. Catelyn could remember hearing old Nan tell the story to her own children back at Winterfell.
And King Harren learned that thick walls and high towers are small use against dragons.
The tale always ended.
For dragons fly.
Harren and all his line had perished in the fires that engulfed his monstrous fortress, and every house that held Harrenhal since had come to misfortune. Strong it might be, but it was a dark place and cursed. Hey there friends, my name is David Lightbringer. Thanks for clicking on my video, and I hope you enjoyed my old Nan voice. And in all seriousness, you probably clicked on my video because Harrenhal is cool, right? Haunted castles are cool. Melted castles are even cooler. Fantasy world curses are pretty cool. And the showdown between Aegon the Conqueror and Black Harren is pretty damn cool. Horror as a genre can be pretty cool, and although A Song of Ice and Fire is definitely fantasy and not science fiction masquerading as fantasy, as some may have claimed, it does blend in elements of, yes, science fiction, mystery, and of course, horror. In particular, George seems to enjoy spinning up twisted tales of mayhem and murder to weave into his fantasy world tapestry, and Harrenhal is simply the place where he's done some of his very finest horror writing. Now, the obvious question to explore with Harrenhal, of course, is why is it cursed? What's up with the curse? But it's also just really fun and interesting to review the twisted and macabre history of the place. That's what we're gonna do, and in fact, no less than 7 lordly houses have come and gone at Harrenhal as of the beginning of A Game of Thrones, with each meeting their doom in a different way. And now it belongs to, Peter Baelish. Well, I'm sure he'll be the one to break the curse and live a long and healthy life. No, he's not going to do that. So yes, there's quite a lot of great history here at Harrenhal, and to cover it in the level of detail that I wanted to, I decided to do this in 2 videos. Just two. In this video, we'll cover Harrenhal's creation and destruction and what comes in the immediate aftermath. So that means the Ironborn House Whore and the many atrocities committed by Black Harren in the creation of Harrenhal, as well as a full dramatization of Aegon's burning of Harrenhal and liberation, that's right, liberation of the Riverlands. We'll also talk about Aegon's subsequent disposition of Harrenhal to the mysterious 4th house of Valyrian descent, House Coharies. And that means we'll work our way to the monstrous and grotesque Gargan the Guest, Gargan Coharies, including his creative execution, shall we say, in the Harrenhal Godswood. Now, after House Coharies goes extinct, Harrenhal moves into its fire and blood, choose-your-own-adventure era of history, where we're given these sort of scandals and controversies and several possible explanations for them, right? So, for example, there's the dastardly tale of Maegor the Cruel and House Harroway, and the similarly dark and dastardly tale of Aegon the Unworthy, House Lawston, and Felina Stokeworth, and a few other mysteries, too. And I was originally going to cover all of this in one monstrous Harrenhal-sized video, nearly 2 hours long. But while consulting with my friend and colleague Greywaste Tim about some of this twisted history and some of these scandals and controversies, it occurred to me that that was the best way to come at this material, with a couple of people, debating these flashpoints and involving you guys in the chat as well. So that's what we'll do. We'll follow up this first Harrenhal video with a live stream with Greywaste Tim this Sunday, and we'll even get you guys in the chat to vote on some polls about what you think the truth is of these various controversies and scandals. Now, if you're watching this video sometime in the future, just look for the link to that second Harrenhal video in the description below the video. And that one will include not only the tragic tales of the Hareways and Lostons and the very bad Targaryen kings that they became entangled with, but also all of the juicy House Strong material, which means the very naughty Kingsguard Sir Lucamore the Lusty, the Witch Queen of Harrenhal, Alice Rivers, whom we'll meet in Season 2 of House of the Dragon, and various other Harrenhal-related atrocities, some of which we've already seen on House of the Dragon, and some of which we will see in upcoming seasons. We'll also talk about the other Witch Queen, if you will, of Harrenhal, Mad Danelle Loston, and we'll even give a sort of dishonorable mention to Janos Slynt, Vargo Hoat, and Littlefinger, each of whom have held Harrenhal for a week and a half or something like that. Woven through all of these stories of Harrenhal are murders most foul, poisonings and burnings and dismemberings, and forced cannibalism. Who doesn't like a little forced cannibalism? I'm kidding. Nobody likes that. That's why it has to be forced. Various rebellions and uprisings, countless atrocities committed both by and against the lords of Harrenhal and their family members, and more than a little bit of involvement with some of the most famous Targaryen kings and princes, including, as I mentioned, some of the worst ones. Somewhere along the way arose the supposed curse of Harrenhal. So let's, start wandering around the place with our little pretend paranormal activity detectors and see if we can figure out what's going on. All right, now when it comes to the curse of Harrenhal, one could start with the question, is it cursed, or why is it cursed? But I think it's maybe more useful to ask, how could it not be cursed, given all the things that have happened there? Having just reviewed all of the history that's gone down at Harrenhal, I can say that it's more like a question of take your pick. It's like a menu of atrocities and horrors, any one of which could leave a curse in a fantasy world where such things as curses, hauntings, and magically befouled places like, Valeria or Shai do exist. The simple fact that George wrote Aegon the Conqueror to have landed in Westeros on the very day that Harren took his seat at Harrenhal just kind of tells you there's something very unlucky going on here. I mean, even the Mews are said to be haunted by the spirits of dead falcons, and apparently Mews are where the falcons used to... What in the world? What is... Oh my god.
Or I'm being shut out of the main No, I could do better. Focus. Hello, this is Reading Rhaegar, and I'm outside YouTuber David Lightbringer's house, where I'm being shut out of the mainstream academic conversation because my ideas about Harrenhal are too controversial for supposed experts like David Lightbringer.
Hey, I'm really sorry about this, guys. Rhaegar thinks Harrenhal was built by giants from the Great Empire of the Dawn like 8,000 years ago or something. I'm not sure, even though we know it was definitely built by Black Harren 300 years ago.
Yes, that's why it's a red herring. Or would it be a black herring, I guess?
Yeah, sounds like a really strong theory, doesn't it? Now, I suppose this is a good time to talk about privacy, which I could clearly use more of. So let me thank NordVPN. Repeat sponsor, NordVPN, the sponsor of today's video. Now, you guys already know that NordVPN is the fastest VPN around, and that it protects your privacy. Nice. By hiding your IP address, of course, and encrypting your traffic. But NordVPN is now becoming more than a VPN to take your security to the next level with threat protection. So I've mentioned this before, but let me explain what it does. It's very cool. So you simply activate threat protection on your NordVPN desktop app, and you will be further protected against malicious websites, malware, data trackers, and those bloody intrusive ads. Not the funny ones, like the one you're watching now, the pop-up ones that everyone hates. And it does all this even if you are not connected to a VPN, which is why it's more than a VPN. So if you accidentally click on a malicious link, it's blocked. And if you accidentally download an infected file, it'll be deleted before it can open and wreak havoc. Trackers that follow you from one site to another and build a profile of you, those are blocked. And yes, those intrusive ads, blocked, like a renegade theorist whose ideas about Harrenhal are not worth considering. And right now, NordVPN is allowing me to offer you their very best discount on a 2-year plan with 4 additional months for free. So visit NordVPN/Lightbringer to beef up your security. And that does come with the threat protection for your desktop software that I was talking about. So NordVPN.com/Lightbringer. And I guess leave a comment below if you think I should let Rhaegar explain his Harrenhal theory. All right, so yeah, as I was saying, Harrenhal definitely 300 years old, definitely built by Black Harren, even though it is described as being built on a giant scale, on a scale more suitable for giants. That is true, but it's just a poetic description. I'm sorry. It just is. Along the same lines, the Hall of 100 Hearths, well, it doesn't really have 100 hearths. It's only got 36 to 38. However, it is still the largest man-made hall or chamber anywhere in Westeros, which is why it was chosen as the location for the Great Council of 101 AC, which we saw on the beginning of House of the Dragon, and of course that was the one that chose Viserys as king. A lot of people were coming, so they needed a big room, and that was Harrenhal's Great Hall. Harrenhal's castle grounds cover 3 times the area of Winterfell's. Its Godswood covers 20 acres, and Harrenhal's kitchens, which are domed, are about the same size as Winterfell's Great Hall. The real giant here, however, was Harren's towering hubris and ego. And as you heard in the opening quote, great were the atrocities which were committed in its creation. I'll go ahead and put that quote back on the screen so we can count the atrocities and start to get an idea of where this curse might come from. So first of all, the Ironborn are definitely foreign invaders in the Riverlands, and they are noted as being especially cruel and exploitative. Harren is plundering the houses that he's supposed to be ruling, and he's been doing that for 40 years. Harren also isn't just plundering those houses for gold, stone, and timber. He's also plundering them for people, which means slaves. That word isn't used, but that's what's happening. Harren is essentially just capturing people, his own small folk and vassals, and working them to death in his labor camps and mines. So that's even worse than normal Ironborn thraldom, which has certain customary rights, and which is similar to ancient First Man thraldom, which of course has now died out basically everywhere in Westeros. That means Black Harren's building of Harrenhal is actually the worst example of slavery in the recorded history of Westeros, which is a continent where, as far as we can tell, slavery has been illegal for at least a couple thousand years. Harren, you'll note, is even exploiting and plundering the Iron Islands, his home kingdom, whose ways he has largely abandoned in favor of the Greenlander customs, all except for stealing, which he still practices with vigor. And then, most obvious of all, of course, when we speak of curses, would be Black Harren's cutting down of the many ancient weirwoods which grew in this area, and then his using them for the beams and rafters of Castle Harrenhal. That's right, he cut down the tallest tree in the forest with a herring! A heron. I should be quiet. Get Rhaegar started again. Sorry. Anyway, yes, those trees were already haunted, of course, with the spirits of the dead before Harren cut them down. So you better believe that people sleeping in the unburnt original Harrenhal probably were already having strange dreams. And then, of course, the castle was burned, and Harren and all of his kin were burned alive, and their fiery spirits are said to haunt the castle, especially Kingspire Tower. This is in addition to the sort of thematic sense of desecration that's inherent in cutting down any sort of sacred grove. But yeah, I want to stress that we do know that the weirwood trees are literally magical repositories for souls, the souls of dead children in the forest, and a few dead human greenseers. So building a castle partly out of cut weirwood trees is kind of like building a pet store directly over an Indian burial ground.
What's wrong with it? Let me guess. It killed a bunch of people, right?
Yeah, dude.
Damn it, it's just like all the other returns.
And of course, all of this was done for the grand and noble purpose of building Harren the biggest castle. That's it. No larger purpose, no use to society, no spiritual goal, no lofty political goal, just self-aggrandizement and hubris. That's why it's called Harren's Folly. And of course, such pride is the feature of many classic myths and fables about pride going before a fall, and George having written Aegon to have landed in Westeros on the very day that Harren took up his castle. Well, yeah, that's kind of telling you this is an unlucky thing right from the get-go. And then Aegon descending out of the sky on his dragon to visit vengeance and destruction and judgment on Harren. That really is like the hand of God striking down the prideful man. And that pretty much sets the tone for the rest of the stories that we're about to hear about Harrenhal, which, again, is essentially a monument to hubris. Two of my favorite quotes about Harrenhal actually bake that quality right into the physical description of the castle. Across the pewter waters of the lake, the towers of Black Harren's Folly appeared at last, 5 twisted fingers of black, misshapen stone grasping for the sky. From outside, only the tops of 5 immense towers could be seen beyond the walls. The shortest of them was half again as tall as the highest tower in Winterfell, but they did not soar the way a proper tower did. Arya thought they looked like some old man's gnarled, knuckly fingers groping after a passing cloud. She remembered Nan telling how the stone had melted and flowed like candle wax down the steps and in the windows, glowing a sullen, searing red as it sought out Harren where he hid. Arya could believe every word. Each tower was more grotesque and misshapen than the last, lumpy and runneled and cracked. "I don't want to go in there," Hot Pie squeaked as Harrenhal opened its gates to them. "There's ghosts in there." Shout out Hot Pie. Yeah, so you can really catch the vibes here, right? Harren's folly, grasping at the sky. I mean, the castle is basically a description of the man, of the archetype, grasping at the heavens. And then an old man's gnarled fingers groping at the passing clouds, groping at the very clouds of heaven that the angels sit on. It's just defiling everything, defiling the sky, the ground, the lake. It's the thing that should not be. Wow. Okay, so that about covers Harrenhal's construction. Oh yes, it does say the stone blocks were mortared with blood, but I mean, that doesn't sound very practical at all. I don't think blood makes a good mortar, but since we've pretty much arrived at Aegon's burning of the castle, let's go ahead and do the old dramatic reading. It's one of the very best scenes in A Song of Ice and Fire, despite the fact it's not even in the main series. It's from the history books, but it's very exciting. So I wouldn't want to summarize it, and instead I will give the reading my very best. And one note, because of Black Harren's cruelty, most of the Riverland houses were quick to turn against him and flock to Aegon's banners, which means that in the Riverlands, Aegon was less a conqueror, actually, and more a liberator. He'll be created as liberators instead of conquerors, as they say. So yeah, the Riverland houses are turning against Black Harren, and he is now holing up in his castle. Suddenly outnumbered, King Harren the Black took refuge in his supposedly impregnable stronghold, the largest castle ever raised in Westeros. Harrenhal boasted 5 gargantuan towers, an inexhaustible source of fresh water, huge subterranean vaults well stocked with provisions, and massive walls of black stone higher than any ladder and too thick to be broken by any ram or shattered by a trebuchet. Harren barred his gates and settled down with his remaining sons and supporters to withstand a siege. Aegon of Dragonstone was of a different mind. Once he had joined his power with that of Edmund Tully and the other riverlords to ring the castle, he sent a maester to the gates under a peace banner to parley. Harren emerged to meet him, an old man in gray, yet still fierce in his black armor. Each king had his banner bearer and his maester in attendance, so the words they exchanged are still remembered.
"Yield now," Aegon began, "and you may remain as Lord of the Iron Islands. Yield now, and your sons will live to rule after you. I have 8,000 men outside your walls."
"What is outside my walls is of no concern to me," said Harren. "Those walls are strong and thick."
"But not so high as to keep out dragons. Dragons fly."
"I build in stone," said Harren. "Stone does not burn."
To which Aegon said,
"When the sun sets, your line shall end."
It is said that Harren spat at that and returned to his castle. Once inside, he sent every man of his to the parapets, armed with spears and bows and crossbows, promising lands and riches to whichever of them could bring the dragon down.
"Had I a daughter, the dragon slayer could claim her hand as well,"
Harren the Black proclaimed.
"Instead, I'll give him one of Tully's daughters, or all 3 if he likes. Or he may pick one of the Blackwood's whelps, or Strong's, or any girl born of these traitors of the Trident, these lords of yellow mud."
Then Harren the Black retired to his tower, surrounded by his household guard, to sup with his remaining sons. As the last light of the sun faded, Black Harren's men stared into the gathering darkness, clutching their spears and crossbows. When no dragon appeared, some may have thought that Aegon's threats had been hollow. But Aegon Targaryen took Balerion up high, through the clouds, up and up until the dragon was no bigger than a fly upon the moon. Only then did he descend, well inside the castle walls. On wings as black as pitch, Balerion plunged through the night, and when the great towers of Harrenhal appeared beneath him, the dragon roared his fury and bathed them in black fire shot through with swirls of red. Stone does not burn, Harren had boasted, but his castle was not made of stone alone. Wood and wool, hemp and straw, bread and salted beef and grain all took fire. Nor were Harren's iron men made of stone. Smoking, screaming, shrouded in flames, they ran across the yards and tumbled from the wall walks to die upon the ground below. And even stone will crack and melt if a fire is hot enough. The river lords outside the castle walls said later that the towers of Harrenhal glowed red against the night, like 5 great candles. And like candles, they began to twist and melt as runnels of molten stone ran down their sides. Harren and his last sons died in the fires that engulfed his monstrous fortress that night. House Hoare died with him, and so too did the Iron Islands hold on the Riverlands. The next day, outside the smoking ruins of Harrenhal, King Aegon accepted an oath of fealty from Edmund Tully, Lord of Riverrun, and named him Lord Paramount of the Trident. The other Riverlords did homage as well, to Aegon as king and to Edmund Tully as their liege lord. All right, well, that was very dramatic, but now the Riverlands are free. Huzzah! Huzzah, everyone. And in all seriousness, it really is something to try to picture a castle that large, the stone being heated to a semi-molten state, melting down the sides, glowing red for hours. Well, it's just really intense. And the temperatures just inside the towers must have been, I don't know, thousands of degrees. One of you science people in the comments, let me know how hot you think it was inside Kingspire Tower. And as I alluded to earlier, the entire castle and Kingspire Tower in particular is said to be haunted with the fiery ghosts of all the people burnt up by Balerion's fires. And then there's whatever spirits were in all the weirwood that was used to build the castle. Those were burnt up too. So if anywhere in Westeros is haunted, it's a place like Harrenhal. You know, places like Harrenhal, the High Heart, where thousands of children, hundreds or thousands were massacred. Obviously, the Night Fort, where countless atrocities have happened. And yeah, there you go. The twins, after the Red Wedding. Maybe not the best place to spend the night if you're a psychically aware person. But I digress, and just in case you missed it, this is the end of the Ironborn House Hoare. They are now extinct, and they will not be the last house to possess Harrenhal and go extinct, but rather only the first. So, now that Black Harren is gone and the Riverlands are recovering under the stewardship of the Tullys and the Targaryen dynasty, what to do with Castle Harrenhal, melted as it is? Well, if you're Aegon the Conqueror, you say to yourself, why not give it to my loyal castellan from Dragonstone, Quentyn Coharies? Because that's what he did. We don't know if Coharies was an important name back in Valyria, but we do know that it is a Valyrian name, and that Quentyn Coharies is of Valyrian descent, as are many of the commoners and non-royals on Dragonstone. Many of them are descended from people who came with Aenar Targaryen from Valyria. So when Quentyn was named Lord of Harrenhal in 2 AC, House Coharies briefly became the 4th lordly Westerosi house of Valyrian descent, along with Targaryen, Velaryon, and Celtigar, of course. Unfortunately, this is a video about a cursed castle, and so it was soon to be 3 Valyrian houses. In 9 AC, Lord Quentyn fell from his horse, which could be the curse, or could just be a thing that happens sometimes. Ask Rhea Royce. That was the curse called Daemon. However, what happened to Quentyn's grandson, Gargan? Gargan the Guest. That wasn't a curse. That was bad behavior. You see, Lord Gargan was called the Guest, and get ready, this is gross, for his habit of practicing the ancient first band, again, disgusting custom of prima nocta, the Lord's right of the first night, which means that Gargan is swooping in on the wedding nights of his vassals and sleeping with the woman before the husband can. This hideous practice obviously amounts to a cultural normalization of rape, and the reader is definitely supposed to understand that the lords who still try to practice it are very bad people, people like Roose Bolton and this Lord Gargan. Of course, monstrous people who feel entitled to other humans like this seldom know much restraint, and indeed Lord Gargan went well beyond the right of the first night, and it says that he simply made free with the women of his servants and vassals. Somehow, this abuse by Lord Gargan was allowed to go on for some 30 years, which, side note, reflects more poorly on the Targaryen dynasty than the liberation of the Riverlands does. So then, after Aegon's death in 36 AC, his weak son Aenys, of course, took the throne, and the treasons and rebellions sprouted like weeds. One of those rebellions was an Ironborn rebellion at Harrenhal under the leadership of someone claiming to be a descendant of Black Harren and calling themselves Harren the Red.
Ah, perhaps now you'll admit it's a red herring.
That's not the same thing. That's not how that works. Now go take a walk or something. So, now Lord Gargan, facing the rebellion of Harren the Red, is surrounded in Castle Harrenhal and beset by enemies on all sides. And unfortunately, the people he's relying on to keep him safe, well, he's been, making free with their wives and daughters. So, yeah, what do you think happened? One of them, perhaps a soldier or a servant, who knows, decided to open a postern gate for Harren the Red and let him in. And that was the end of Lord Gargan. No, it's a little more complicated. Gargan the Guest then became the guest at his own castration, which was done in the Godswood. They fed his genitals to some dogs and then let him bleed out. So that was the end of Lord Gargan. He was later cited by Queen Alysanne as one of the many reasons to shut down and outlaw the right of the First Night. She pointed out correctly, obviously, that not only does it victimize women, but also fosters resentment and discord in the realm, which then leads to further violence, like what happened here at Harrenhal. And clearly there's nothing supernatural about what happened to Gargan. That was the natural comeuppance that was coming his way, one way or the other. If anything, punishing him in the Godswood before the Heart Tree seems like an action taken to appease residents of the castle who worshipped the old gods of the Weirwood, who would have in turn been offering the blood of the monstrous Gargan to the Weirwood in some sort of attempt to appease the old gods for all the evil that he did. So yeah, this isn't really a cursed thing as far as I can tell, but Gargan's tale and the subsequent extinction of House Coharies, because Gargan was the last living Coharies, certainly adds to the horrific history of Harrenhal, which is not even 40 years old yet, which means that it's younger than me, and it's already seen a lot. I mean, I've seen a lot too, actually. All right, so that covers the unholy creation of Harrenhal and its, again, fiery renovation by Aegon the Conqueror. And we've even begun to dip our toes into the monstrous history of what comes after with Gargan the Guest and Harren the Red. And by the way, Harren the Red's little rebellion is soon put down after a bit more horror, because you see, when Aenys sent the Tullys to deal with Harren the Red, you'll notice he did not fly there with his dragon to burn down Harrenhal and deal with the rebellion himself. He sent the Tullys to do it. And when Harren the Red realized everyone was coming for him, he put everyone in the castle to death that wasn't loyal to him and fled into the countryside. Harren the Red was eventually hunted down by King Aenys' hand, Lord Alan Stokeworth, with Harren the Red actually slaying Lord Alan, but then being slain in turn by Lord Alan's squire, Benar Brune, who was himself knighted and then went on to become the ancestor of Lothar Brune, who is Peter Baelish's man in the main series. So now we need a new Lord of Harrenhal, or do we? Or do we? At some point, we really do have to ask the question why anyone is trying to hold this oversized monstrosity that really should not exist. That in itself may be the heart of why Harrenhal appears cursed. It's simply too big to manage, and thematically, which is probably more important, it represents a power that should not exist, much like Tolkien's One Ring. There's just simply no safe way to possess it. Even the 40 years of awful slavery to create the castle and the line about how it rose like a shadow over the lake, as well as the rumor that the stones were mortared with blood, well, it all just kind of gives the place the vibes of, the Tower of Barad-dûr in Mordor. Or perhaps the Tower of Orthanc at Isengard. I don't know if there's a cool Aragorn way to say Isengard. But yes, Barad-dûr, Mordor, tens of thousands. All right, that's enough. So yeah, Harrenhal, it never should have existed. It can't be possessed. But nevertheless, we have to keep trying. So enter House Harroway. That's right, it's time for House Harroway. What could go wrong? A lot could go wrong. Maegor the Cruel went wrong. But to hear that story, you'll have to tune in this Sunday, or just, again, check the description below for Harrenhal Part 2 to find the answer to that. So thanks very much for watching my videos. Have a look around the channel, find some other stuff you like. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss a live stream, and I will see you this Sunday for Harrenhal Part 2.